Welcome to the Chrome to Opera pipeline. Now, as a disclaimer, I am a mega yapper, so I wrote a ton of shit, and feel free to pause and read what I don't go over because it is relevant, but I don't want to waste your time, so we're gonna run through this quickly, mostly because it took an interesting turn near the end, and I want to focus on that more than this bullshit I made up. Without further ado, first off, Chrome, the browser. It's kind of known for being a RAM slut, but it gets the job done, and has decent features and a large extension store. It's like vanilla ice cream. It's not necessarily the best, but it is the most well known because it's good enough for most people's tastes. Opera GX, the browser for gamers. It's definitely not for everyone, and it is a bit AI forward, but its unique features grants it plenty of legitimacy among browsers, and its aggressive advertising has taken many gamers off of Chrome. That being said, although it pushes hard to be for gamers, as a past user, it can't really do much for that, and browsers can't really be expected to anyways. It was slightly more performant and seemed to be more consistent in saving tabs when closed, which happens often on a system with limited resources, like my laptop, in order to maximize its performance in a game. Seeing upcoming game releases in the GX corner was also kinda neat, but I looked at those like 3 or so times in all of my browsing. Also, it does have mods, but those are fun for like an hour tops. It's like all those 3D printed fidget toys. Opera, my beloved. Its best feature, in my opinion, something that I've been wishing to see for the majority of my life. It's built-in ad blocker. But what about GX? Is it not the same? No, it isn't, because it lacks one important feature: allow acceptable ads. Hot take. Full-on ad blocking is bad and incentivizes the end of free online services. Opera, not only having built-in ad block, but also that feature, is something I really appreciate. So yeah, I do think it's pretty decent for a mainstream option, and I like its style and features, and it's like a much less bloated version of GX. The GX to Opera plan. Opera has had a bit of an uptick as of recent, and I'm going to present my case for why I think GX was made to make Opera more popular and why people would switch from GX to Opera. I mean, obviously, first off, popularizing another browser under the same name would bring more attention to the original, but I think there's a little bit more to it. Opera gave GX plenty of attractive features to bring in new people, but has withheld important features from it that people who know of the Opera name might find out Opera has and decide to switch over. They could have just pushed for Opera to be the browser for gamers and implement GX's features into Opera instead of making a new browser, but Opera already had its great public opinion take a large hit after the switch away from Presto in 2013, which was its Chromium equivalent. Making a fresh start allowed them to control people's opinion of GX and thus repair Opera's reputation much easier. Also, GX didn't even have a Linux version until recently on March 19th, 2026. During all of this Microslop stuff, people were switching to Linux all over, and many people like me were either using or interested in GX. But since that essentially wasn't an option for people new to Linux, one would either just get another browser, stick with Firefox, which is usually the Linux default, or decide to look into non-gamer Opera, which has had a Linux version for a long time. I think trying Opera is the obvious answer here, and its very similar style and extra features made it feel like a good choice. And let's be honest, losing all the GX features is basically like losing the built-in RAM limiter tool. Everything else it has that Opera doesn't is pretty much just bloat. Now, I do want to present some data. Most of the pipeline thing was just me thinking real hard about some random stupid idea I had. Believe it or not, that isn't the best way to learn new things. And honestly, this data didn't reveal much, but I did find it interesting. This is a browser market share graph from statcounter.com. Now, I couldn't find any data that clearly separated Opera from GX, but this seemed to be the best data set I could find for my purposes. It is a bit hard to see because we can't zoom in on it on the site, but they provide a CSV file, so I put that into a Python graphing project I have, and we're going to take a closer look at it using that. I have included Edge for this graph just for some more comparison. As you can see, this is indeed the same dataset, just a bit more steppy because I'm not smoothing out the chart. And as you can see here, Chrome was at about 65% up here, if you'll bear with my insane baseless ramblings for a minute, it seems to me like Chrome still has plenty of room to grow here, but GX exists around this area, and it looks to me like Chrome prematurely plateaued right here, which is around when GX was released. It is a bit harder to see the finer details down here, but now we can zoom in on that. As a reminder, this is around where GX is, and you can see that around its release, Opera starts a spike in popularity. I really think it would have been plateauing around this level, but instead it started to bounce back. I think it looks like Firefox was also impacted by this. To me, it looks like it too was about to stabilize, something like that. But instead it went way down over GX's existence, despite more people switching to Linux, which generally has Firefox by default. And I think these spikes could be related to microslop events. And it does seem like Edge is having somewhat opposite chunks taken out of it at those times, and Firefox's peaks even line up with Opera's peaks. I think that's all very interesting. I don't think that it does show that these people were moving to Opera, but I do think that it could imply that. Alright, so what do I think is going on here in simple terms? We have Chrome, the largest competitor. People here may be unsatisfied with the browser's performance and or style. Opera GX, the attacker. It does everything it can to take people from Chrome. Its ads often put down generic bad browsers while describing Chrome. And Opera, the collection net. When users deem it no longer worth using GX for whatever reason, they may still be interested in the Opera style, and be drawn to it for its more mature nature. And thinking back to the graphs I just showed you, I actually also expanded this into a web involving Firefox and Edge. Here's the path that I took through this web. Now obviously I used Edge for its only purpose. Then GX's advertising pulled me in. Sometime after, I made the switch to Linux, and used the new default browser on my laptop to look for GX. I saw that it wasn't available on Linux, and so I got Opera. And now, I'm looking for something else as I start to take, among other things, my online security more seriously. Speaking of, now we reach the real bulk of where my efforts went for this. Nani, the fuck? There are other browsers than Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and Opera? I have condensed hours of my research into quick and digestible overviews of 3 potential options I found for my next browser. I made a quick description of what each is, its foundation and AI stance, limitations I found, and its style. And I also threw in my own opinion of their icons' flavor. Then for each, I will pull up a screenshot of its UI, and for this step I simply opened each browser and just searched YouTube using the URL box. Now, I have been trying out and customizing Vivaldi a bit before its screenshot was taken, but it is still very similar to how it comes out of the box, and most things about it can be changed anyway. I do want to mention something before I get into this, and that is the matter of security in browsers. When you look into browsers, you'll often see all these claims of security being thrown around, and it's a bit confusing when all of them are doing it. Are you taking big risks of being hacked by sticking with mainstream options? Well, no, I don't think so. I do think these big companies don't give as much care as they should in that category, but if something like Chrome wasn't as secure as it is, it would be catastrophic. No. The main bulk of what more knowledgeable people than me seem to be worried about is the company itself behind the browser, as well as legitimate advertisers gaining access to your data. This could be things like your medical history, your accounts, your usernames, passwords, where you live, anything they can get their hands on, how much time you spend in certain applications, and then their careless protection of that data, leading it to being leaked later on, or just them directly using it for malicious intent. When you see browsers claiming to be more secure than the big guys, this seems to be their main point. Of course they care more about the being hacked side of things than the big guys do, but it mostly seems to be about the measures that keep their own hands as well as the hands of advertisers away from your personal information. The mainstream guys are doing whatever they want with your data, and you should be more afraid of them than the hackers. Even Firefox, which has long been praised for its privacy and security, has been making some suspicious changes lately, though I and many others would still certainly consider it very safe. And as an open source nonprofit, Mozilla just doesn't have the incentive that other companies have to suck as much money as possible from its users. So I don't ever think it'll be like inshitified, but people are certainly less happy with it now than they were before. And speaking of Firefox, our first alternative here is LibreWolf, with, I think, pretty decent wolf icon. It's basically Firefox but anti-AI and more secure. Since Mozilla makes the backend of Firefox open source, this is actually essentially using real Firefox as a base, which is really good for security on its own. That said, it is a relatively small fork and cannot be quickly updated to Mozilla's cutting edge of security. But being a step behind Firefox is still a pretty good spot for security, especially with all the telemetry and whatnot scraped out. Which is basically like I said, the main point of these browsers. That being said, it can be a bit more involved to install it than just clicking a button, depending on what OS or Linux distro you use, but I don't think that should be a big issue. And being a Firefox fork, it uses Mozilla's alternative to Chromium, Gecko. Since most of the internet is built with Chromium in mind, some sites do not work properly out of the box. Though I have seen talk online that this can mostly be fixed by fiddling with the settings. Also, I just kinda don't like how it looks. I've just never been a fan of how Firefox looks, and this is obviously going to be very similar. I just think it's a really old feeling style. And here's what LibreWolf looks like. Next we have Brave, with its weird looking lion icon. Seriously, I've always thought this just looks really weird. Am I the only one? Anyways, it's basically Chrome but security equals yes. It is Chromium based, but they have adopted AI, which is something many people will not agree with, including myself. As far as I can tell, it seems to be widely considered the single best browser for security, period. So good, in fact, that I have found people complaining about its security features actually causing issues with some media and logins because they don't comply with its strict safety standards. However, it does seem like this does not mean you are locked out of those things, just that you have to turn off its shield features in order to make things that are broken work again. And as for its looks, it goes for a very Chrome look, and I'm also not the biggest fan of that look. To me, the Chrome look feels excessively corporate and cold. There's also just something about the Brave iteration on it that, I don't know, just makes me feel afraid. I can't describe it. And this is how it looks. Yeah. And finally, Vivaldi. I saw this icon and immediately thought of Vine. Like, come on. It's like, it looks like, the icon looks like the evil version of Vine. It's basically Opera but anti-AI, secure, and more customizable. It is also Chromium based, but this one is firmly anti-AI. I've seen a little bit of talk about some media not loading correctly on it, but it does seem to be a very rare issue, and I haven't seen any talk about completely broken pages, unlike LibreWolf. And as for my opinion on how it looks, I actually think it looks pretty good. It's based on Opera, which I've already been enjoying the look of, and it's extremely customizable. Just for comparison, here is how Opera currently looks for me, but do consider that I have made some settings and customization changes since first getting it, but this is very close to how it will look for you out of the box. So as you can see, it has that sidebar. The Opera workspaces are here, the Vivaldi workspaces are here by default. Again, you can change this in Vivaldi as far as I know. You can change most of these things as far as I know. The tabs can be on the left or the right or even the bottom if you want. All that. The takeaway. Sometimes stupid trains of thought lead to productive ones. Vanilla is mid, but most widely liked because no one dislikes it. Opera is pretty decent for the average person, but GX is bloated. And neither should be a serious consideration for your final stop if you're looking for a secure browser. And just because most versions of a product have the same shitty practices doesn't mean you have to settle for that. Not all the options sell your data, not all the options are pro-AI, and open source is based as hell actually. And if it takes too much effort for you to learn about browsers in order to min-max your safety and experience, and you don't want to deal with the difficulties that can come with browser maxing, that's fine. Not everyone has to be the nerdy dude, and I think Opera is a pretty good recommendation in that case. But maybe just try Liberal, Brave, or Vivaldi if you do care. Side note, interestingly, Vivaldi has a lot of ex-Opera employees from before its controversial switch to Chromium in 2013, including its co-founder/CEO. Honestly, do be looking like a snack, but that's probably what my next one will be. Okay, that's it, bye.